When the news of Azie Osborne's death spread across the world, the reaction followed a familiar script. Headlines rolled in, tribute playlists filled streaming platforms, and fans prepared themselves for what they believed would be a predictable ending to an extraordinary life. But history has a habit of simplifying endings, and this one was no exception. What unfolded in the days surrounding Azie's passing was far more restrained, far more intentional, and far more revealing than the public initially realized. Beneath the noise of remembrance existed a series of carefully chosen silences, moments that spoke louder than any eulogy. This was not just the death of a rock legend. It was the closing chapter of a man who spent decades balancing chaos and control, rebellion and reflection. And as the details slowly emerged, it became clear that Azie's final farewell wasn't designed to impress the world. It was designed to tell the truth. Azie Osborne passed away on July 22, 2025, at the age of 76, inside his Buckinghamshire home, surrounded by Sharon and his children. The family described the moment as peaceful, but peace, in this case, came only after years of physical decline and emotional reckoning. Parkinson's disease had steadily tightened its grip, compounded by spinal injuries and surgeries that limited his mobility and independence. By early summer, those closest to him understood that time was no longer an abstract idea, it was a narrowing window. Azie himself seemed aware of it. Friends later shared that his conversations shifted tone, less focused on legacy or music, and more on gratitude, reconciliation, and closure. This was not denial, it was acceptance, and that acceptance shaped everything that followed. In the weeks before his death, Azie's world grew smaller by choice. Public appearances stopped. Interviews ended. Even casual visitors were limited. Those who were allowed into his inner circle noticed something striking. He spoke as someone finishing a sentence, not starting a new one. Then came July 5th, his final appearance at Villa Park in Birmingham. Branded as a concert, it was, in truth, a farewell disguised as celebration. Seated throughout the performance, Azie faced the city that shaped him with clarity and resolve. More than 40,000 fans watched in person, while millions streamed the moment worldwide. Behind the scenes, medical staff and family members stood ready, uncertain whether he would finish the set. But he did, not because he had to, but because he wanted to close the loop on his own terms. That night at Villa Park was never meant to signal a return. It was a punctuation mark. Azie knew it, his family knew it, and the band felt it. The reunion of Black Sabbath's original lineup wasn't nostalgia, it was acknowledgement. When the final note faded, Azie retreated from public view entirely. According to those close to the family, the days that followed were quietly purposeful. Private calls were made. Long-standing relationships were addressed. Loose ends were tied not for optics, but for peace. Azie had always been clear about one thing. He didn't want a farewell shaped by corporate gloss or emotional spectacle. He wanted honesty, music, and humor, nothing more, nothing less. And that philosophy would guide even the moments he wouldn't live to see. When confirmation of his death finally came, it did not arrive with dramatic statements or orchestrated appearances. The family informed close friends first, allowing grief to settle privately before the world rushed in. Only later did the public announcement follow. Almost immediately, fans gathered outside the family home. Flowers lined the gates. Vinyl records leaned against stone walls. Some people stood silently for hours, unsure what to say. That silence became the emotional blueprint for what followed. This was grief without instruction, mourning without choreography. It revealed something essential about Azie's connection to his audience. People didn't just admire him, they felt him. On July 30th, 1 week after Azie's passing, Birmingham witnessed something it hadn't anticipated. A public funeral procession moved through the city, tracing a path rich with personal meaning. It passed Osbourne, where Azie grew up, and Villa Park, where he had said his final goodbye weeks earlier. What began as a coordinated civic event quickly transformed into a communal outpouring. Thousands arrived early, many wearing worn Black Sabbath shirts that carried decades of memory. Others brought nothing at all, trusting presence to be enough. When the hearse appeared, something remarkable happened. The crowd didn't erupt, it unified. His name echoed not as noise, but as ritual. Music led the procession, but not in the way tradition expects. A brass band played Black Sabbath melodies, turning heavy metal into something almost ceremonial. It wasn't irony, it was intention. The hearse itself reflected careful symbolism, adorned with purple flowers and a cross that nodded to imagery Azie had carried throughout his career. As it moved through Broad Street, the city transformed. Advertising screens displayed simple messages of love. Police allowed the crowd to move closer, resisting over-control. At times, the atmosphere surged with emotion. Seconds later, it fell into near silence. That contrast made the moment feel real, unscripted, and vulnerable. Exactly what Azie would have wanted. Notably, the family did not take center stage. They followed the procession quietly, choosing distance over display. This wasn't detachment, it was respect. By stepping back, they allowed Birmingham to claim its moment of goodbye. But there was one stop where everything shifted. Black Sabbath Bridge. As the procession slowed, the chanting softened. The city seemed to inhale collectively. The bridge had become an organic memorial, layered with notes, flowers, and personal messages. This was not planned. It was allowed. And it was here that the farewell became deeply human. Sharon Osbourne stepped forward first, supported by Jack and Kelly. She carried a single rose, no speech, no microphone, no statement, just presence. She placed the flower gently among the tributes and paused longer than expected. Witnesses described her grounding herself against the bench, steadying the weight of the moment. Then she raised her hands in a peace sign toward the crowd. Simple, familiar, undeniably Azie. The children remained close, protective, without being performative. One by one, they honored him quietly, without order or instruction. The family stayed only minutes, but those minutes carried a gravity that lingered long after they left. What followed would take hours to surface. In close-up images and unedited footage, a subtle detail emerged, one almost no one noticed in real time. Around Sharon's neck hung a thin gold chain. Attached to it was a ring, not symbolic jewelry, not decorative. It was Azie's wedding ring from their vow renewal, a marker of survival after rupture, love after collapse. Sharon never addressed it. She didn't explain it, and that silence gave it weight. Sometimes the most powerful storytelling happens without words. And sometimes, the truest goodbye is the one no one announces. As footage from the Birmingham procession circulated, another quiet pattern began to emerge, one that had little to do with spectacle and everything to do with protection. Jack Osborne's presence throughout the day was steady, deliberate, and deeply intentional. He stayed close to Sharon at all times, never drawing attention to himself, yet subtly shaping the space around her. When crowds pressed forward, he shifted. When the wind caught her coat, he adjusted it. When she paused, he paused with her. These were not gestures meant for cameras. They were signals between people who understood the emotional cost of public grief. Later, sources close to the family revealed that Jack had taken on a central role in the final weeks of Azie's life, managing logistics and communication, so Sharon could focus on surviving the loss rather than organizing it. Kelly Osbourne chose a different form of silence. Throughout the procession, she did not address the crowd, the press, or social media. She remained physically present but emotionally guarded, honoring her father in a way that felt deeply personal rather than public. It wasn't until later that her tribute appeared, a single image shared online with a short caption suggesting that words were unnecessary. For many fans, that restraint spoke volumes. Azie had built a career on sound, but his daughter chose stillness. In doing so, she reflected a truth many forget in moments of loss. Not all love needs explanation. Sometimes grief is honored best by refusing to perform it. Once the public farewell concluded, the Osbourne family disappeared from view. Cameras were turned away. Access was denied. The story, for the first time, belonged entirely to them. Later that evening, family and close friends gathered at the Buckinghamshire estate for a private service that had been planned with precision and intention. No reporters, no live streams, no external commentary. Approximately 110 guests attended, including longtime collaborators and trusted friends. This separation between public tribute and private mourning wasn't avoidance, it was boundary. Azie had spent his life in the spotlight. His final goodbye would include darkness, laughter, and memory without intrusion. The atmosphere at the private service reflected the man himself. Emotional, yes, but never heavy without relief. Stories were shared that spanned decades, from early days in Birmingham to the chaos of global fame. Laughter broke through tears. Glasses were raised not in solemn silence, but in warmth. Witnesses later described the gathering as deeply human, filled with contradiction in the best way, mourning balanced with humor, grief softened by gratitude. This was exactly what Azie had requested years earlier in interviews. He didn't want to be remembered as untouchable. He wanted to be remembered as real. The burial followed shortly after, away from public view. Azie's final resting place was chosen on private land near a lake within the estate, a setting that offered peace, control, and protection. Floral arrangements surrounded the site, including personalized tributes that reflected the language of his life rather than the expectations of tradition. This was not a location meant for tourism or spectacle. It was chosen for privacy, for family, and for permanence. In death, as in life, Azie resisted being packaged. He belonged to the world, but only on his terms. Even as the family withdrew, the global response intensified. Across continents, fans organized spontaneous memorials in places that had shaped Azie's legend. Outside legendary music venues, candles burned through the night. Records played on portable speakers. In cities where he had never lived, people gathered anyway, bound not by geography but by sound. These weren't coordinated events. They were instinctive. Proof that Azie's influence wasn't confined to albums or eras. It lived in personal memory. For many, his music had been present during moments of rebellion, grief, and survival. Saying goodbye felt personal, even for those who had never met him. Fellow musicians responded not with polished statements, but with reflection. Longtime collaborators shared images and memories from behind the scenes, moments never meant for public consumption until now. Others spoke about how Azie had changed the structure of rock itself, redefining what darkness, vulnerability, and power could sound like. These weren't just tributes to a man. They were acknowledgments of a cultural shift. His passing marked the end of something foundational, a chapter that had shaped generations of sound and identity. Back in Birmingham, the city began transitioning from mourning to memory. Plans emerged for permanent tributes, including artwork near Osbourne and continued preservation of Black Sabbath Bridge as a living memorial. For days, the items left by fans remained untouched, flowers wilting naturally, notes weathering the air. Officials made a deliberate choice not to sanitize the space too quickly. Grief, after all, doesn't operate on schedules. The city understood that this wasn't about closure. It was about honoring a connection that had always been mutual. What made Azie Osborne's final farewell so unexpected wasn't the scale, it was the restraint. The most powerful moments weren't announced or explained. They were noticed later in reflection. A ring on a chain, a son standing silently between cameras and his mother, a daughter choosing quiet over commentary, a city chanting, then stopping. These fragments told a story far richer than any headline ever could. They revealed a man who, beneath decades of spectacle, valued sincerity above all else. So the question remains, did knowing these private details change how we understand Azie Osborne? Or did they simply confirm what some already sensed, that behind the darkness and theatrics was a man deeply aware of love, loyalty, and endings? His final farewell wasn't designed to be replayed endlessly. It was designed to be felt. And perhaps that's why it continues to resonate. If this story revealed something new to you, share your thoughts below. Which moment stayed with you the longest? And for more untold stories from the world of rock legends, stay connected. Because some truths are only heard when the music fades.